The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in this episode are that of the guest and host and do not necessarily reflect the values of sponsors or other associated organizations. Welcome to the Parental Compass, presented by Family Education and Support Services. I am your host, Bobby Williams. I want to start by giving a big shout out to Molina Healthcare. This show is supported through their Molina Cares program, building stronger communities, one life at a time. So thank you, Molina. We release new episodes of the Parental Compass every week, and the best way to keep in touch with us and what we're doing is to go on Spotify or Apple and hit subscribe. That way you'll get notified every week when a new episode drops. Also, you can check us out on parentalcompass.org. What we are doing today is the first in a two-part series about raising a child with autism. We're working on a second episode where we will be speaking with a member of the Autism Coalition, but today I wanted to get the personal side of the situation. Here to speak with me today, returning to the show, is Erin Jones. Erin is a former teacher and statewide candidate for superintendent for the Office of Public Instruction. Erin is also the mother of a child with autism. I want to start by recognizing that everyone's story is different and different people have different circumstances. So what applies to Erin's life may be different than yours. Still, I think there's great value in what Erin has to say. So welcome. Let's check it out.
We have two sons, and our oldest son was 2 when our youngest one was born, and so they grew up together. And our oldest son is super active, always throwing a ball. And my husband and I were both college athletes, so we're really athletic and kind of expected that our children would be too. And so our oldest one came out of the womb shooting basketball. I mean, he just was super coordinated and always holding a ball, always throwing a ball, always running everywhere. Our youngest one was not that. And it was so funny because we used to talk about him as the alien child. Like, he had this giant eyes, this giant head, and he was always falling all over himself. Like, he just super awkward, super kind of the opposite of his brother, uncoordinated and like big hands and big feet, but just it felt like he was constantly tumbling over his head, like his head was bigger than everything else. And that was the first thing, like, oh, he's just really awkward and like weirdly awkward. And as he got older, like 2 years old, and he was able to communicate really well, almost better than anyone around him. So he would hear, my husband and I are both really educated, and we never talk to our children like babies. We always talk to them like adults. We use big words with our children and just made up points of that. And he could hear big words and use them correctly the first time he used them. So by 3 years old, he was already using polysyllabic words correctly. But it was weird. Like, he was really, he talked about things like a grown person already at 3 and didn't really engage with children his age, didn't like playing things like the other little kids did. But he would listen in on our conversations and repeat things. And if you promised him something, like if you said we're going to go to this thing on Friday and you did not do it, he would get so like crazy angry and upset. If we changed routines at all, he would get really upset. And that's when I realized, and I had already been teaching for a little while, so I hadn't had an autistic child in my classroom yet, but I'd been around autism enough that I began to suspect something was a little off.
What were the emotions going on at the time when you started to realize that?
You know, I think it's hard for any parent. So we already knew at that point that our oldest son had a writing disability. We didn't know what it was called at the time, but so I'm a mom and an educator, and I'm realizing both my children have something going on that is not, it's not anything that my husband and I had grown up with. You know, school for both of us was, we were really good at school. My husband has a master's degree from Notre Dame, and he
Notre
has a
Dame.
Bible.
My dad
Yeah.
works at Notre Dame, so.
Your dad works at Notre Dame.
Yeah,
Okay. That's where we got married. We got married in South Bend, Indiana.
South Bend.
So yeah. So my husband is really smart and did well in school. I did really well in school. And then our oldest child, like, he would start crying. Anytime you had him write for more than a minute, he would start crying. And we knew there's something not right with his hand. Well, it turns out he's dysgraphic. He's also ADD. He's also a little OCD. And so we've got this one kid that has this thing going on, and now we've got another kid that, and so the emotions weren't so much shame as it was, oh my, like, what did we do and how do we support this while I'm teaching and my husband is the youth pastor. So we've got like hundreds of kids that we're responsible for. Now we're adopting a kid who's been through a lot of trauma, and we have two kids that have these different needs academically and socially, and it was overwhelming, to be honest. That's the thought that I can describe best, is I wasn't ashamed exactly, but I also knew as an educator that once Black boys are qualified for special education or 504, if you look at the data, they are not treated well by schools. And so for me, there was a lot of fear around getting them tested, because I knew I had been in public education long enough to see what happened to Black boys who were identified as special ed, and I didn't want that for them.
What did that look like?
You know, for our kids, our oldest one really struggled. So our oldest one had a really hard time in school. I mean, he was called stupid by a second grade teacher. He had a really similar experience in 8th grade, had another experience like that in high school. Not good, really not good. And it's amazing he graduated from high school, because he was not treated well by public education for the most part. He just wasn't a normal kid. And I think anytime in public schools, kids don't fit into the norm, whatever that is, it's a struggle. But then being a large Black male, it compounds things. Our younger one didn't struggle. Our younger one is also qualified as gifted, which is another interesting thing. I have kind of similar ideas around disability as I do around gifted. I think every child is gifted in some way. And so to label certain kids as gifted, I think is really hard. And so here we have a young man who is probably on the spectrum, but also taught himself to do math on his own. So he taught himself multiplication before he started school on his own. I didn't teach him that. He figured it out himself. And so he qualified for gifted education or gifted programming the first year he could, 2nd grade, and was one of the top students in his class, also the only Black student. So he experienced just, I don't know, there are some dynamics there that I don't know that he realized. One of the gifts of autism or being on the spectrum is they don't realize some of the things that are happening around them. I did, though, as mom. I watched some of the ways that he was mistreated, or I felt like he was mistreated or doubted because of his size and because of his skin color. I don't know that he ever picked up on that as a kid, but I did, though. And that was hard as a mom to witness kind of the expectations for him. You know, he can't possibly be that smart. And that was really hard for me as a parent. It was also hard because kids didn't want to be around him. So like he had a birthday where not one person showed up for his birthday party. And that was incredible. I think he was 9 years old when that happened. And that was, as a mom, that I remember telling my husband, so again, our daughter's birthday and his birthday are the same day. And she had all kinds of friends that showed up, and not one kid showed up for his party. And I remember saying to my husband, honey, can you just take him out to his favorite restaurant and get him? I mean, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do, but we need to get him somewhere where he can have fun tonight. And I'm the one crying. I had to go outside and cry a little bit. because I
Yeah.
felt so bad that not one person showed up. But, you know, he walked through several years like that where he just didn't have any friends at all. And he was the only Black kid. So it was like, okay, is this the autism? Is this the being Black in an all white environment? Is it an intersection of the two? And so that for me as a parent was really painful. It was really hard. And he preferred being around older kids and around adults. Like he thrived around adults. Even as an elementary school kid, he preferred having adult conversations and reading adult books. And he just was grown. He liked grown people's music. But it was hard as a mom to watch that and to realize that being at school was probably a bit tough for him. And then we were really fortunate because North Thurston opened a gifted school, and it was a gifted and musical, like an art school and a school for gifted students. And that's where he really found his people for the first time, was 7th grade, finding all the theater nerds. And that just is where he found his people.
Why do you think he was drawn to theater?
So to be honest, I don't think he was drawn to theater. I think his older brother and sister both did musical theater. All my kids are singers. Like, we sing, we play instruments. So they were all exposed to that early. But his older brother and sister were both in theater in the high school, as he was in middle school. And I think they really pushed him into that. And so it wasn't something he chose. But what we learned, though, later, especially once he got to high school, is the nice thing about theater, first of all, is a lot of theater kids are just kind of weird anyway. So autistic kids are a little weird, and theater kids are a little weird. And so they just work it out. And I find that theater kids tend to accept pretty much anybody, however you show up, whether you show up as like gay or bisexual, or whether you're autistic. Theater kids would just kind of take you however you are. And so that community was really welcoming. The other thing that I realized as a teacher when he did his first play was he often struggled with reading social cues. So, you know, people would tell a joke and he wouldn't realize they were being funny. He thought they were being serious, and he wasn't really sure how to respond. Well, theater tells you, so-and-so is going to say this, and then you say this. So-and-so is going to move here, and then you move here. And it gave him all his cues. So he didn't have to read cues. He memorized cues. And he was able to move. And he really thrived in that environment and did really well, and actually did theater all the way through high school and into college.
Well, and I think you need to have something to be about, whether that's sports or music or theater. It gives you a sense of identity and then a whole community. So I totally understand that. Did you think Izzy would go to college or be independent enough to do that?
No. If you'd asked me freshman year of high school, as brilliant as he was, I still couldn't imagine him ever living on his own or going to wedding. I just couldn't have imagined it. And it wasn't until theater, like, he really became involved in theater junior year of high school in a really significant way. And that's when I began to imagine, okay, he's starting to kind of figure the social stuff out. And so maybe, but then I thought, you know, St. Martin's has a great engineering program, and that's what he wanted to do, engineering or computer science. And so really most of his senior year, I thought, well, St. Martin's then, you know, he'll go right down the street. We can walk there to see him. He can come home whenever he wants to. And then he applied to USC and Harvey Mudd in LA. And I was like, yeah, I can't even imagine that. And he got into both, and my husband took him down to visit. And I remember my husband texted me when they were at USC, and he's like, honey, these are not his people. These are not his people. This is not a good fit for him. And USC was just way too big. And, you know, just people were preppy and cool. And that's not our guy. I mean, he's nerdy, and he likes to wear the same t-shirts. Like, he has a rotation of t-shirts that he wears. He's like, yeah, USC is not going to work. And then a day later, they went to visit Harvey Mudd. And if you don't know Harvey Mudd, it is one of the best engineering, math, computer science schools on the West Coast. It's really the Harvard at the MIT, really, of the West Coast. And they went to visit there, and my husband said, oh my gosh, we have found his people. Whoever the kid was that was taking them around campus when they went to visit was just like Izzy. And And he really found his people there, and still, even though he's finished with college now, they get online, his friends from Harvey Med, they get online all the time, and a lot of them are spectrumy. They're all someplace on the spectrum, and a lot of the professors, I've had the opportunity to be at Harvey Med several times and got to meet professors and other faculty and staff on campus, and I was like, oh, this place is filled with people just like Izzy. And so he really found his people and found his place in the world. And what's ironic now is he's at USC for graduate school in not computer science, but mixed media. And I've met his friends there, and they are all really similar. They're all kind of spectrumy, which Bill Gates is too. So, being on the spectrum is not necessarily a bad thing. It just makes things a little bit harder to navigate sometimes.
Yeah, but if you get to be super intelligent too, that's a real added plus. It's just awesome that things have worked out for them and for your family like they have. Do you have any words of advice for parents who might be going through a similar situation?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, fear is normal. I think first of all, kids don't come with a manual. So we have 3 children, and they're each different. And man, they challenged us, and we're teachers, and it was hard. It is hard being a parent. It's a forever thing. It's hard being a parent because they're all different. And so if you're a little bit afraid, like don't feel ashamed of being afraid. That is just part of parenting. But here's the other thing I will say is get resources, like ask for help. Get online. There are so many resources online. If you just Google get help for a child with autism, there are so many resources. And so don't be afraid to ask for help. I think sometimes our fear can paralyze us, and sometimes we can feel like, oh my gosh, I created this broken child. No, your child is not broken. Your child just has some differences, and it's going to take some additional support. And I realized that my child is high functioning. I have friends who have autistic kids who don't communicate. They have to use sign language, and they probably will be at home. Each of us are in a different place. Every autistic kid has different assets and different challenges. Find help for yourself. Get online and figure out what the resources are. Get help from your school. Find a community of other parents. There's so many Facebook groups that you can become part of that will help you, so that you don't have to do this by yourself. You do not have to parent by yourself. Don't have to do it by yourself. There are so many resources. And so I would say to parents, don't be afraid to reach out to other people. And it helps sometimes to know you're not crazy. I think sometimes as a mom early on, I felt like, man, I'm messing this up. I'm doing this badly. I'm not good enough as a parent. I have broken my child, or I haven't set my child up to be successful, and I failed them in some way. And just to be around other parents walking through those same concerns, I think it's helpful. It's helpful to know you're not by yourself, and to know that other people are walking through the same thing, and to be able to get resources and support. And the earlier you get that support, the better it will be both for you and for your child.
Well, Erin, just thank you for coming on again, and thank you for being so open and real with us.
Oh, thanks for having me. I hope parents find this useful, and please, even Thurston County has some resource groups. So just Google, autism support, and you can find other people who are walking through the journey like you are, who want to help you.
Erin, thank you for taking the time to come on this show. I know you're busy, so it means a lot to us. You can keep up with Erin and all the amazing work she's doing by following her on Twitter. Look her up. Her name is Erin Jones in 2016. She is active. She's doing great stuff. That's the show. Big thank you to Family Education and Support Services and Molina Healthcare. My name is Bobby Williams. This has been The Parental Compass. We'll see you next week. Peace.